Yeah, I met mine. About the offer. Come on. Goodbye, Spectrum Show.
Okay, we can make a start, I think. Still a few making their way in. Should we give them another minute? Oh, it's on. Yeah, no, I'll just start. Well, before we do start, I want to address a vicious rumour that someone started and told Chris Wilkins about me, that I hate the Spectrum. They said, why have you got him doing a Spectrum talk? He hates the Spectrum. I do not hate the Spectrum. I just prefer the Commodore. There's nothing wrong with that, is there? Hate's a very strong word. So, we will get going then. Welcome to Crash Live 2023. And my name is Mike James. I'm a host founder, producer of the Retro Gaming Roundup podcast. Every month since February 2009, we've done a monthly show. I'm also the author of Smoke and Mirrors, which is a book about the retro VGS, the Coleco Chameleon and all that saga. And I'm also a volunteer at the Northwest Computer Museum in Leigh in Lancashire. My glamorous assistant down there, Victoria, is loaded up with leaflets. So if you haven't checked us out, if you want to find out more about us, if you want to come and see us at some point, feel free, please do. It's a wonderful place. It's a hands-on museum, and we do have several Spectrums that you can play with. But that's enough about me. We're not here to talk about me. We are here to speak to our esteemed guest, and a big round of applause, please, for Mr. Ian Oliver. Thank you. Now I'll put my readers on for my question. So welcome Ian. Now I'm told you're used to public speaking, but not perhaps this kind of setup. So what do you make of all this?
I'm a little bit blown away, to be honest. It's I can't believe how well attended it is and how enthusiastic people are for something that I haven't forgotten about, but at times I've tried to forget about, to be honest.
Yeah, it is strange, you know, I speak to a lot of people from the industry like yourself from all different eras, and to us, what you did, you must be a multi-millionaire living life by the pool. You've written all these games, and yet some of your games were just that much in a long career and probably mean far less to you than they do to us. How do you view that kind of conundrum?
I mean, I spent less than 10 years as a games programmer, and you know, I spent longer than that effectively working for a company doing semiconductor design. So I think of myself more as a kind of a chip designer and somebody in the silicon chip semiconductor industry than games. But games is where it all started, and you know, I still have a soft spot for a lot of the games, and you know, nostalgia is a powerful emotion. You know, you get some pretty big waves of it at times, particularly when people go out of the way to say, you know, how much they enjoyed playing some game you've done, but by the way, did you know you've got a bug here? That kind of thing.
These are the people to find it.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago, somebody had me fixing some bugs in the x86 version of Carrier Command. And that code base.
So most people will know you, and we'll come on to Carrier Command later, don't worry. Most people know you from your time at Realtime Software, but you didn't just wake up there one day. So tell us about the journey that took you to that point in your life and your career.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been, well, not always, but I've been interested in electronics since I got an electronics kit as a 12 or 13-year-old, and managed not to electrocute myself and build radios and weird circuits. And my first encounter with a computer was, it must be mid-70s. In some class at school, there was, I don't know if anybody knows the ASR33 teletype, which only does uppercase, and it's got these round keys with ridiculous travel and 110 board serial done mechanically. Nasty thing, and it just prints on a roll of paper. And this was at my school in Bridlington, and there was a telephone line with an acoustic coupler to a computer in Hull, and we were playing Lunar Lander, typing in what angle we wanted to fire the engines for how long and try and avoid hitting the moon. And I thought this was great. It was fantastic. You know, as soon as I can get a computer, I will get a computer. And I was waiting tables and working in kitchens and earning enough money to buy an Ohio Scientific Superboard 2, which I think was 78 or early 79, which was a 6502 machine running Microsoft Basic. It was what the UK 101 clone was cloned from. So I got playing around with that, and soon got fed up of the limitations of Basic. And on the back of the manual was the grid of 6502 instructions with all of the addressing modes there and all of the instructions there. And I was like, this looks interesting, what is it? And from a 4-line example in the manual and from that grid, I worked out 6502 assembler. Well, not assembler, typing in the hex. And I was using it to generate big mazes to do kind of Dungeons and Dragons games, and it was just too slow in Basic. So I knew the 6502 pretty well, other than any instructions near the end of the alphabet with a complex addressing mode. The bottom right-hand corner of the grid hadn't printed too well, so you couldn't read all of the hex, so I just avoided some of those instructions. And decided that you couldn't do computer science at school then, or computing or anything, because the teachers didn't know it. I was the first person in Bridlington with a home computer. I was in the Bridge Free Press, and nobody came forward to say, you know, I bought one a while ago, so I think I'm good with that claim. And decided, you know, I'd head in that direction at university, so that's how I ended up meeting Graham Baird and Andy Onions, all of us doing degrees in computer science in Leeds.
So, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. So if the internet's correct, Realtime was founded on May the 8th, 1984. You were all studying at Leeds Uni. What were you all studying? Did you all finish your degrees? And what made you decide to, well, let's start a company?
Well, we didn't really start it as a company. We just started it as a game, to be honest. And we started in our final years. Graham may have dropped back a year. He had some family issues that meant he had to just sit out a year, so he was a year behind us. And we were all into microprocessors, and all of the machines at the university were big mainframes, which weren't that exciting. And I liked Battlezone in the arcade and could play that all day for 50p. So we thought, well, let's do a version of Battlezone. I don't think we started it with any view to commercialising it. We just thought, let's do it. But then, as we went through, we went, do you know, actually, this is quite good compared to a lot of the other things we're looking at. And I can't remember the order of events, but Andy Onions came along and went,
Does that remind you of anything?
That's Andy Onions in the background, yeah. And me, if that's a microphone, I've probably got a pint hidden just out of, just out of view. He said, my father's renting some offices to some people who started this computer games magazine, and, you know, chatting to them, and they reckon there's a way to commercialise this thing. So it suddenly turned into something we could actually sell. But, you know, there was no great research and planning behind it. It was like, well, we're going to have to make some tapes. So we got a tape duplicator in Barnsley to make the tapes, and I think Pronto Print in Leeds City Centre to make the inlays, which we designed. And we used fellow students kind of doing piecework or pizza work, stuffing the inlays in the boxes. And
no shortage of volunteers.
No shortage of volunteers. And I don't know how publishers got in touch with us. The only way somebody could place an order was to phone the block we were in Lupton Hall of Residence and ask for Ian or Andy in flat 5F, which is not really the way people run businesses nowadays, or then, to be honest. But we sold, because there was no publisher, we weren't on royalties. It was basically what it cost us to make the tape and what discount we gave the distributor, and everything else was ours to take to the pub.
So that there is the game you were just talking about, your first effort, 3D Tank Duel. So you did everything in-house? Did you do all the artwork and all the design yourselves, and who in the company did what aspect?
And the artwork, such as it is, we did all of it. My memory is Graham and I did the inlay, just basically with a ruler and a pencil, and getting somebody to print it on the black. The programming was teamwork. The development environment we had, as you know, Steve was saying earlier, was at the time was not expensive. It was, we wrote Tank Duel on one Spectrum with one cassette recorder, and we didn't even have a printer. So it was hard work. And as you're working on it, you're doing something, you think, oh, we could have done that far better. But you don't really have the time or the ability to go back and make any large changes. You know, you can go back and patch in one better way of doing a multiply, or one better way of doing a divide, or something like that, but you can't radically alter the way things are done. So we came out of Tank Duel knowing a lot of what we did wrong and what we could do better in future, and we'd made, for a bunch of students, you know, making £3 a copy over 7,000 copies, £20,000 in 1984 money. We were like, well, this is a really good way to avoid having to get proper jobs. We will definitely do another game.
So moving along to that other game then, the following year in '85, you did that one, Night Flight. Any standout memories from that? Obviously, you've gone back to 2D. going in at, with 3D in your first game a bit too much? Did you think let's do something a bit easier?
I'm sure Night Flight was a long time afterwards because that was on the QL.
It's 85 according to the internet. Yeah.
No,
if the internet's correct, I'll take your word for it though.
I think the internet must be wrong on that one.
Right.
I mean, I did work on the game, but it was a QL game, which I think dates it to a little afterwards. I don't know. I'll have to check.
It's copyright 1985.
Does it really?
Right.
Well, I stand corrected.
Thank you, that man.
I mean, I stand totally corrected. It shows how fallible memory is.
That's the kind of person that finds bugs in your games.
Yeah, I apologise for inadvertently misspeaking. QL Nightfly again. We liked the what's the game called?
Joust.
Joust. Of course, it's called Joust. We liked Joust in the arcades, and we were working away with Realtime, and a friend of mine who also did a degree in computer science there, but he was going on to do a PhD. He'd got a QL and he was coding away on it, and to be honest, I was more helping him or occasionally hindering him and just suggesting things and working on the gameplay. And in the end, he said, "Why don't we publish it?" So we published it. It must have been at about the same time as Starstrike, but I got it way afterwards in my memory.
So you've mentioned a couple of things there. You've mentioned, I called it inspiration, but you broached the subject already, which makes me feel less bad. So Tank Duel bears marked resemblance to Battlezone, as you said. Then Night Flight looks very, very similar to Atari's Joust, and then Starstrike looks incredibly Star Wars-like. So were you a fan of Atari arcade games?
You could say they were inspired by it, or you could say they were unofficial cover versions. I don't know what's the most legally defensible position really, but yeah, we were doing home computer versions of arcade machines.
Unofficially,
but we were being careful to not use wording or characters. I mean, Night Flight, the graphics were very similar. We were a bit risky on that one, but it's like you go to Starstrike, it's not a trench on that big round thing. It's an equatorial duct.
Important distinction.
Which is a legally defensible distinction. But I mean, it's there's nothing new in the world, and maybe we should have been inventing new things, but we weren't. And we'll come to it later, but doing new things is massively harder than taking a proven idea and knocking into shape on a different platform.
It is a bit of a double-edged sword though, because if you're doing a game that's, let's say, inspired by something else, it's got an existing fan base, you're going to sell some copies, but if you do it badly, they're going to come after you with pitchforks and torches.
I don't know why they didn't, to be honest. We must have just, either we flew under the radar, or they decided not to bother, or we changed just enough to do with, not saying, you're this person, you're that person. I mean, it's why in Starstrike we changed that final thing. You weren't firing a bomb down a hole, you were shooting two targets. It was just trying to change it.
In an equatorial duct.
In an equatorial duct, Your Honour. And I don't know whether it was because we were careful or because we just flew under the radar, but we never heard a peep.
You can see there from the cover art on 3D Starstrike, the artwork has improved massively. So was that someone in-house? Did you start going outside for artwork?
That was Oliver Frey.
Right, okay. It looks Oliver Frey-ish.
Yeah, it is.
So you can't be that under the radar then?
Hopefully with Atari we were, but because Newsfield were renting properties of Andy Onions' father, there was a degree of mutual back scratching. I don't think that went to, them changing what they did with reviews, but there were definitely at times reviewing the game when we hadn't finished it. I seem to remember towards the end of Starstrike, we'd occasionally read the crash review to know what to do next. But just for the last few weeks, really. But no, we realised that we did get some criticism for the cover art on Tank Duel, and doing some cover art that bears no resemblance to the game whatsoever that wouldn't feel very honest. But yeah, jazzing it up to what we really would have liked the game to have looked like that. If we could have made it look like that, we would have done. But artist's impression.
Yeah.
Serving suggestion.
So by 84 then, certainly the British computer industry has got lots of the systems, there are others that I didn't include here. Were you still literally typing on a rubber keyboard, or were you spreading yourselves around the systems?
For Starstrike, we actually had some money to buy some hardware, and the interface one had come out. So rather than it being a big disaster if the machine crashed because you're going to have to reload your binary from tape, because we didn't have a linker, we were just patching binary in from assembler typed into rem statements. But it meant if it died, you weren't out of action for ages unless your micro drive died as well. So it was a better environment. I don't think we considered moving away from the Spectrum straight away. We looked at the Commodore 64, but the GraphGold guys were talking about how they didn't think Uridium could work on the Spectrum. We didn't think things like Starstrike could have worked on the Commodore 64. But some playing around we did later on, and in particular one guy I employed who's gone on to work in the industry to this day. He was doing amazing things on the Commodore 64. We were wrong. We should have been doing 64 versions of those.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that aspect. Everything's developing in the computer industry. People are buying newer and better computers all the time, upgrading the ones they've got. They want bigger and better games. You'll hear from Simon Butler in a talk later this afternoon, and famously, he was at Ocean when Gary Bracey said, we're never going to 16-bit, we'll stay at 8-bit, and he left at that point. So what were your conversations and your thought process? I mean, did you think this was, you're out of uni earning a lot of money, and was it a gravy train you thought we're on forever, or did you know that you had to move?
We knew things had changed. We knew machines would get faster, different machines had come along. We really, really wanted them to. We were frustrated by the limitations of those machines. We kept finding ways to work around the limitations in some mightily creative ways at times. But at the end of the day, you're still dealing with what you're dealing with. People have gone on to take it further and further, as the previous session showed, and great. But as soon as we got a chance to leap on some of the 16-bit as ST and Amiga, we took it. But you see, when Spectrum Plus comes along, and the other Spectrums, you can do versions for those. But the bread and butter, the big numbers, are still in the base Spectrum 48 bog standard as sold in 82, 83. So, even though you're doing some of this, bleeding edge stuff like we did on 16-bit carrier command, we did so many different versions of carrier command. On Z80, we didn't do the 6502 one that was subcontracted and not even directly. But yeah, you chase the numbers. I mean, the GraphGold guys were saying they were into the Dragon 32 after my Superboard. I think while I was at university or in some break. Again, enough money slaving away 48-hour weeks in a hotel to buy a Dragon 32, and I loved the 6809. So I think after Tank Duel or after Starstrike, I wanted to push out something on the Dragon, but I think it was some of the guys from Design coming, are you mad? Have you seen the sales numbers?
Yeah.
And we were like, oh well, we won't do that then. So
Yeah.
Did we sell out? Did we do something that we would have enjoyed more because the money steered us somewhere else? Absolutely. You've got rent to pay, or in some cases mortgages to pay, and you have to do what's going to sell.
So we are moving into slightly the next era now. We're looking at Amiga era, ST era, and some DOS as well. And you did Starglider. So what was the company like at that point? Was it still just the three of you plugging away, or you brought other people in?
It was still just, it was kind of the time when we started bringing other people in, but it was mainly just the three of us plugging away. We realised the industry was changing and our kind of ad hoc way of duplicating tapes and hawking them around wasn't working. We were completely failing to get into some of the big retailers because they were saying, well, we do our buying decisions in June and it's now late October, so how on earth are we going to get you in for Christmas? And you know, people had started asking about your advertising spend before they asked about the game. And we realised things had changed, and did we really want to change with it? And I can't remember, I don't think we approached Rainbird, I think they approached us, and they said, we've got a very big game on 16-bit and we would like loads of 8-bit versions, and you guys are very well respected at doing 3D games on 8-bit, so we'd like you to do it. And we went, okay, fair enough, we're just finishing off the Amstrad version of Starstrike 2, and they went, fantastic, and to take some load off you, why don't we publish it? So I think, you know, the Starstrike 1, we used our traditional, you know, stuffing cassettes in boxes and shipping them out with Securicore approach, and Starstrike 2 they published. And we went off to see Jez San, who was working in his bedroom on Starglider, and we said, yep, we can do the 8-bit versions of those. I don't know how many versions we signed up for, probably 6 or 8, something ridiculous. I even did that for the Amstrad PCW8256 word processor.
And sold lots of them.
There weren't many other games out for it, so yeah, it did all right. But I think I did that port in 3 to 4 weeks, something ridiculous. So yeah, we did loads of versions of Starglider. Because we had by then good, well, in fact it was Rainbird put us in touch with a guy doing some good development tools. So we started cross-developing, not pounding away in a Spectrum. We had, you know, all of the line drawers and all of the things for handling complex 3D shapes that were animating, and you know, every single bit you needed was there. So Starglider is the project I've worked on that went the smoothest. It's almost like it was writing itself. It went so quickly on the Z80, we were putting in stuff from the spec and then being asked by Rainbird to take it out because Jez San hadn't got around to doing it on ST and Amiga. But you know, to be fair to him, he was starting from scratch without all of that know-how and without all of these, you know, collections of bits of code and things like that. So, and there were 3 of us and 1 of him. So,
So you mentioned there you were well respected for your 3D games, but then you did change tack and you created what was touted to be, and I haven't checked this with the internet, but I'll take their word for it, the first real-time strategy game. So what brought about that change? I mean, there are 3D effects in it, but what brought about that change in the type of game you were making?
Rainbird said to us, we want to work with you again, and why don't you do something new? Why don't you do something that really exploits this 16-bit machine? We didn't know what ST and Amiga were capable of, and we started dreaming up ideas. And Rainbird actually came to us and said, oh, we've got this games designer who's come to us with this idea for a game that was called Submarine Combat Simulation. And it was a good game idea, and Graham Baird and I in particular kind of took the idea and ran with it, and we were, you know, brainstorming it and chatting away and coming with other ideas. But it ended up that Rainbird completely fell out with the game designer, and they said, we still want to work with you, we like a lot of your ideas, do something, you know, more on your ideas and his spec, and by the way, don't have submarines in it. So this is why Carrier Command is for the most part above water, is none of this underwater submarine stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where the ideas for Carrier Command came from. People have asked me at times. I think it more comes from board gaming and Dungeons and Dragons, and the idea of just giving somebody a big world, and there's some rules and there's some toys, and I'm not going to tell you how to play this game. You know, you get in and work it out for yourself. And we did get a kind of a 1.5-page outline, which I've still got somewhere from Rainbird, saying we want a kind of 3D game where you're storming an archipelago of islands and blah, 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 blah. And we took that and fleshed it out into something about 10 times the size, which I still have. And if you read through that, that is essentially what we did with Carrier Command. If we'd have known what we were biting off, we wouldn't have done it. It nearly killed us. And to give you an idea of, you know, where we were at the time, we were still kind of, I think we just got some offices, But I signed the contract for Carrier Command to do something like 8 versions. I think it was the day after my 24th birthday. We said we'd do them all in 6 months. That didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, it was a labour of love, but it was also one of the hardest things I've ever done. My wife Mary was around with me for all of those days, and it was a very rough ride towards the end, you know, when the money's run out and the pressure's building up and all these kinds of things. But we got through it, we did it, and we were happy with the end result.
So what made it such a big challenge? Because it's such a big game, there's just so much more technology going on.
It's such a big game, and we weren't cheating. All of the strategy for the supply lines was done correctly in the background, and you almost had to do some things twice. So battles take place when you're not at an island, using a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, 20-sided dice rolling of who's got what resources. Okay, now you've lost these resources, you've lost those. That's happening all over. And then as soon as you visit an island, all of that kind of statistical stuff gets unpacked into a 3D world, and you try and have a battle along the same lines in the 3D world. But yeah, there was a lot of it, and we saved the hardest parts till the end, you know, some of the battles with the enemy carrier, and there was just a lot of game and a lot of challenges and a lot of new things to do, and we just hadn't realised what a big job it was going to be. So, you know, Rainbow were piling the pressure on as well. They were good to us in retrospect, but you know, we have been completely out of money for a long time. You know, it's like, you know, you can't afford the car insurance, you sell the car, and it's like, well, that's another 2 months of mortgage. You know, that was the way it was.
Wow. So I was told anecdotally that you got a little help with the vector graphics from someone in the office next door. What's that story?
Yeah, they asked us a lot of questions. There was no kind of knowledge transfer as such. They could not work out how we were doing some things, and you know, if they asked us, we'd give a Sphinx-like answer. It's like, how are you doing that so fast? It's like, oh, well, you see, you've only got a certain number of T-states available, so you have to write your code to use fewer of them. which is true and unhelpful. We were doing some very smart things to do with, just an example, polygon sorting. We didn't polygon sort. We drew it from back to front without ever sorting the polygons. So, you know, I do remember Andy Craven saying, when that manta lands on the aircraft deck and goes down in the lift, we've looked at it from every angle and we can't see any polygons drawn out of order. It's not what you want. we draw them in the right order, from the back to the front. And some of those were techniques we came up with just for carrier command, and we were putting our 3D objects were done as a language, not a data structure, which sounds odd, but that's the way it was. And with a little interpreter, and like in the carrier, you slice it with planes. And in the language, you say, okay, there's this plane, depending on whether it's visible or not, which is just a cross product, either draw all of that, and then that, or the other way around. And then you can say, okay, at this point in the whole object, if you finish drawing all of that, if there's anything on the lift, draw that, and then draw all of that. So you kind of break off and do this sub-object. So, you know, they were the tricks we were using, but we certainly weren't sharing those ideas. You know, so some of those were the crown jewels, and they're taken us a long time to work out.
Yeah. So there's a few company logos up there. You've mentioned Rainbird already, but these are some of the companies that you were working with. I mean, it sounds like you're still getting your hands dirty in the code at this point, but at what point did you start to maybe move away from that and start to let other people get their hands dirty?
I did not move away from writing games myself until we pretty much shut Realtime down. We did have other people writing them, but the last game I did personally was Abrams Battle Tank for the Genesis in '92. So I've been in gaming for less than 10 years. That was the last one I did. And if you think writing games yourself is hard, wait until you try employing other people to write the games. That's even harder. You know, you think we were naive about many things, and how you employ people and get good work out of them is one of those. We thought we can do it with these people who've been employed, being your mates and going to the pub with you all the time and all this kind of stuff. And you know, I've learned since then running large teams of people. At one point on the semiconductor side, I had a team of 60 people across 4 continents, and you have to learn how to manage large teams of engineers. And it isn't by the mob being your best mate and going to the pub all the time.
At any point, did you think, I just want to go back?
Well, back to
coding.
back to coding. I did. I became less and less hands-on as we were doing all of the programming tools. During all the time because it was '89. We set up Cross Products doing the programming tools so that we were kind of in control of our own destinies on that side of things, and that ended up outgrowing Realtime, and I was just burnt out of gaming and some of the pressures of all of that kind of thing, and the games tools side of things was really taking off, so it was just natural for me to transition to doing the tool side of things and shutting down Realtime, and then a couple of years later Sega bought our company, so I'm kind of back into gaming again.
So was it just that you kind of outgrew Realtime, or did you think, I don't want this pressure of carrier command again, I'm done with this, it's time to move on?
It just wasn't working anymore. I think the way I put it since is I'd just simply run out of me.
Right.
There wasn't anything left. It was time for something new. I don't know how. I've met people here today I've known for years, and they're still in the games industry, and I don't know how they do it, because it's a meat grinder. It really is. I mean, I've stayed alongside the games industry. Obviously, I was part of Sega all through the Dreamcast days, and then, moved on into semiconductors. But that was with Imagination Technologies, and we were doing chips for smartphones and games consoles. So, I was still meeting a lot of the people I'd met before.
Yeah, we'll touch on that shortly. I believe you were more a project manager on Powermonger, so you kind of stepped away from the code at that point, but still in the games industry. How does that sort of fall in that timeline?
I think I was occasionally poking into the code base on that one, and John Mullins, who was doing the coding of it, he is somebody I definitely count as a friend. We didn't go out to the pub a lot and things like that, but we were learning the difference. In fact, John came back and worked for me for years when we were part of Sega on all of the Dreamcast development tools. But yeah, it's Realtime had always done a little bit of work for hire on the side. Yeah, we were asked to do Starstrike for the Enterprise Elan computer, whichever name they picked in the end. And
Welcome, thank you.
I think it was called the Flan for a while as well. It was called the Flan. And we ported Starstrike to that.
That's your game, was it? I read that on your computer, and that's why I bought 2 last year, because I read that article. I even seen graphics because I read about that. I wasn't sure if it was yours or not. I couldn't find the article yet.
Yeah, we did Starstrike for it, and we took the Starstrike binary, and we put the Enterprise hardware into a mode that looked like the Spectrum screen, with a few differences, but we.
I bought it from Hungary, both box one, because of that article talking about yours,
and
how amazing it was.
It went well. They never paid us for it, but yeah, it went well, and we just beat on the binary, and we put patches in to do sound effects and to change how it all worked. And it did not make the best of the machine, but it did the job. And then Ocean came to us and said, "A little bird tells us you can port games to the Enterprise just by beating on the binary." We went, "We can, but if you've got any kind of listing, it'd help." And they went, "We'll have to see." So we did Bruce Lee, Raid over Moscow, and Beachhead, ported them all to the Enterprise in about 2 to 3 weeks each, just by getting a binary from the Spectrum Master, and let's call it a very intensive poke session.
Is that a euphemism?
Yeah, we just kept patching in bits of code and changing bytes here and there until the game was running somewhere different. And the hard part was the sound. I seem to remember I did Beachhead. I think I completely did all of the porting such that the game was working in a few days, and I had to do it in a few days because we were going on holiday. We went on holiday, and I kept calling Andy and Graham and going, how's it going? Have you finished it? Have you finished it? Have you finished it? And they're going, oh, we're working on the sound, we're working on the sound. And I came back off a 2-week holiday, and they'd done this really pathetic water effect for one beach. and I don't know what else they've been doing. I was living
While the cat's away.
While the cat's away, but you know, we were a team of equals, and to demonstrate that,
Some are more equal than others.
I then did all of the sound for that one and shipped it. And because we were working for Ocean, I don't know if they got paid, but we got paid by Ocean, so that was fine.
Yeah,
that was good.
So it was published then on the Land Enterprise. Like I said, I've got a hard copy. If it exists.
I know Starstrike. I think they were all published. I don't know. At that point, we'd taken the money from Ocean and become a creditor of Enterprise or whatever they were called, and moved on to something else. To be honest, but yeah, we'd always done little bits and pieces on the side, and towards the end of Realtime, some of this was catching up for us, and we'd got more things we'd promised to do than we were actually getting around to doing. So some people had to have the money back. I think when we shut Realtime down, I think the only people who lost out were Mirrorsoft, because we'd taken advances and stage payments on a game, and we just had to say to them, we're just going to have to hand you what we've done today, and you get it finished, which they kind of did. But you know, I don't feel too bad about doing the dirty on the Mirror Group. I feel a little bit.
They did the dirty on plenty of other people. Sensible software for one.
They did the dirty on lots of other people on their pensioners, but I think they were the only people who, other than the directors, we all had to remortgage our houses. You know, these things happen. But you know, that paid off all of the debts, and we shut Realtime down, effectively saying that, you know, we would have all of the rights in exchange for the fact we'd just paid all of the bills.
So the three of you went your separate ways, so to speak. Did you reconvene at any point? Have you got back together and done things since?
We've had the odd meet-up, and Graham Baird did.
It's not like a rock band where you've all fallen out, is it?
No, we haven't fallen out. No, I've completely lost contact with Andy Onions, and in fact, the last thing I saw about him is a rather strange newspaper article, but people are going to have to Google that one for themselves. You might know the one.
I don't know the one, no. But I will be Googling it.
I will be in the bar later if people want to know the correct words to Google. And I do meet up with Graham Baird when we can, but he's got some serious health issues, which means he's a little bit cut off from humanity at the moment. And some of the people who worked for us, I occasionally meet up with those people as well. But you know, it was the whole Realtime thing was this less than 10-year thing, and you know, it had pretty much ceased by the time I was 30. So it was one of these things you do in your youth where you look back at it and you go, well, there were some real highs, there were some things I was proud of, but I'm really glad we got some of those mistakes out of our system at such a young age when we didn't have as much to lose.
Yeah. When nobody expected any more of you. So
well, that's the big problem they did.
Yeah. So there's a big gap in the internet's knowledge, but you've touched on it already. Semiconductors and working with Sega and for Sega, and the Dreamcast era. Can you tell us, you know, what you were doing, what you did the day after Realtime shut, and you woke up and thought, oh.
Well, we were already. It was a little bit of a shock when we realised it was the end of the road for Realtime, but you know, we had the. I was just so busy reverse engineering consoles to make pieces of hardware for them to connect them up for our cross development tools. So you know, there was no idle hands involved. And then, you know, selling those tools, supporting those tools. I did all of the tech support. I wrote all of the manuals, such as they were. Reverse engineer all the consoles, and then I'd give to somebody else my piece of, you know, wire wrapped and hand patched on their board or whatever, depending on the era, board to somebody to make a PCB and start marketing it. So in some ways, it was almost like our original Realtime model. There's nobody else involved. You get it manufactured, you sell it, etc. And then in '94, something really, really strange happened, which is we got a call from EA to say, could you pop down and see us, because we'd like to talk about strategic relationship. So we went down to see EA.
Did you Google what that meant?
Google wasn't around, and I really should have done. So we walked in and said, by strategic relationship, what we mean is we'd like to buy your company. Like, okay, fair enough, but you need to go out to America to talk to those guys about it, really. So we were actually due there kind of a week later, so I said, well, we're very interested in talking to you, we'll add you to the schedule. And went out to California and went into EA, and they said, okay, what we really need you to do is to do a business plan and a cash flow forecast and a return on investment analysis to show to our management that this is a good idea. We kind of thought that was their job,
Yeah.
but they thought it was,
You rang me.
that was our attitude. So they said, well, you know, when do you want to work on it? We said, well, why don't we make a start now? So they stuck us in an office, and Andy and I looked at each other and went, sod this, and we just walked out. we never spoke to them again on the subject. But we'd had I had done a few games for Sega. They wanted some 3D games on the Genesis, so I did Abrams Battle Tank. And we knew all those guys, and they were buying our product from us in large quantities. We got a call from Joe Miller, and he said, could you pop in and see us this afternoon, because I'd like to talk about a strategic relationship. We were like, we know what that means now.
Do you also want all this other stuff?
So we went in and they said, yeah, we want to buy your company, and they didn't want us to write a business plan, so that was a big factor, and we did a deal fairly quickly. They acquired Cross Products in its entirety. I got some golden handcuffs to require me to work on for a few years. We'd actually got a few other things. Andy Craven, who we'd started it with, he was into music, so he started a music studio and he was doing this, that and the other. So he went his way with the other bits and I went my way with Cross Products. And worked for Sega for 7 years.
So were you based in the States at that point? No,
I was in sunny Leeds.
Right.
And I'd switched from it being my own company to reporting into Californian corporate structure with all of their kind of ways of doing things, and that was a learning curve. But it was interesting. I learned a lot. We did tools for, you know, the 32X, which was kind of okay, and Saturn. But we kind of inherited. Sega had a go at doing it for themselves, to be honest. They'd gone, rather than buying this stuff from Cross Products, why don't we design it ourselves and do our own software? And then it really didn't go that well, so they acquired us. So they went, here's what we've done so far. And we were like, okay. And we made it work. And yeah, it was interesting with Sega of America. But then the Japanese side, I'd always been told they've got no idea why we've acquired you. They're quite happy with their Zax emulators sending code down a serial line, and you'll only be doing tools for the West. But I only found out a couple of years ago the Japanese had actually really liked Abrams Battle Tank. And Ken Balthaser, who was running Sega of America, he said in this book that came out recently, he said that was one of the things that convinced the Japanese that there were some decent Western programmers. And I think the Japanese suddenly went, that Ian Oliver who did that game we like, he's the same one. So my ownership moved to Japan. So I would then report into the whole Japanese structure, which was even more of a learning curve. So I think that was when they were just starting Dreamcast, and I worked with the American side of the Dreamcast based off 3DFX and the Japanese side at the same time. So I was doing development tools for both systems, foot in both camps, back both horses. But yeah, I still shed a tear for Dreamcast. It was a shame the way that one went. It was a nice machine, and we did one of the best jobs of a development environment we've ever done. Lots of different bits and pieces there.
Yeah, it's sadly too short-lived, the Dreamcast. I'd agree with you that the dev kit stuff that you're talking about is interesting. Lots of people like yourself have made their own and sold them. If you wanted to buy a SNES development kit, you're looking at $60,000 or something before.
Ours was cheaper. Ours was cheaper.
Yeah, and well, lots of people were making their own and using those.
Yeah. You're never going to get all of that market. You know, some people have got their own preferences. But yeah, the Super Nintendo one, SNASM 658. I remember sitting there with a Super Nintendo with a load of wires attached to the cartridge port, using a 20 meg oscilloscope to work out which pin on that was which, and how it booted, and how we could do a piece of interface hardware for it. So, but then we would just straight away commercialise that and turn it into a commercial product. We did quite well from that one. We sold quite a lot of those.
Yeah. So we're going to come sort of full circle back to Carrier Command and the dreaded M word, Microsoft.
Yeah.
So did they phone you or did you phone them?
Well, it's a completely different thing. There's a guy called David Laggetti in Australia. He basically bought out the rights to a lot of old Microprose stuff. And he approached us about doing a remake of Carrier Command, which was coded by Bohemia. Neither of us were that pleased with the job Bohemia did, to be honest, which is a shame, because the guys who run Bohemia credit Carrier Command with getting them into the business, getting into gaming. We did expect it to be better than it was. I don't know if they were concentrating on some of the title or what, but you know, there were some big flaws in it, which was a shame. I had real high hopes for that remake, you know, as did David. It just never quite came together as a game. It looked very pretty, but you know, none of the enemy tactics worked. I think after all of the patching and all of the kind of the unofficial patching, I think they ended up with a decent game, but it was too late by then.
Yeah.
But loads of people have done. There's been any number of official and unofficial remakes of Carrier over the years, and things inspired by it.
Inspired by it.
Yeah. Whether they admit to it or not. But I kind of don't mind that. You know, it's where we started. There's nothing new in the world. Everybody takes ideas from everybody else and recycles them and throws in a bit of their own. And yeah, it's good to see it happening. There's yet another new version of Carrier Command out by David under the Microprose name, and as mentioned, patching the old code base. As part of that, he wanted to put the old code base out on Steam with better audio, which is why I was fixing bugs and helping with some audio patching. David now owns all of the rights to Carrier Command moving forwards. So it's now, he can do anything with it he wants, books, games, anything. He maybe an offer I couldn't refuse. At about the same time, we've got quite a lot of new sets of bifolds to pay for. so the numbers kind of matched, and we weren't going to do anything with it. So we went, you know, whatever. You know, we've still own the rights to the original games and the moral rights and things like that. But it's down to him to commercialise it moving forwards, and I help where I can.
So was this Xbox 360 version, working with Microsoft on this particular game, was it just a frustrating experience all the way through, or just a disappointing end result?
As I said, I sold the entire rights. I had pretty much nothing to do with it. I do communicate with one of the guys who's the main coder on it, with Skype about cooking and home improvements and all kinds of things, and occasionally something to do with software. But yeah, it's. I didn't have anything to do with any coding on the remake. You know, we were paid something for it. I think I was paid as a consultant for playtesting it, or something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, you talked about, you know, moving away and being less hands-on, and with some of this stuff, I couldn't really be less hands-on.
You know,
it's just the way things work. You know, I went back to the old code base and I thought, I'm not sure I can do this anymore at my age.
Or looking back and thinking, why did I do that?
What on earth was I doing there? You know, some of what we were doing in Carrier Command with iteratively working out the best routes between islands and things. It's kind of an iterative spread across multiple games set of very, very large directed graph theory. And in mostly uncommented x86, so I could work it out.
So we'll come to the audience in a second for some questions, but what occupies your time these days while you're paying for all these bifolds?
I'm pleased to say I managed to retire about 5 years ago. So now I mostly do as I please. I have always kept on hands-on engineering, even if it was nothing. In fact, ideally, if it was nothing to do with what I was doing at work. So I still do electronics, a bit of embedded stuff, a bit of Python, a bit of 3D modelling for things that I 3D print. But I've got quite into, laser cutting and CNC machining and all kinds of things. And I do things like volunteering at a thing called Repair Cafe, where people bring in broken things and you mend it like a whirling dervish for 3 or 4 hours and send them on the way. So I've acquired about my own body weight in specialist tools for doing all of that I drag along to those events. And for some reason, take a look at me and guess what I've ended up specialising in. I get all of the hair straighteners.
How do you test them?
That's a good question. So somebody got me to amend a very expensive laser hair removal device, and I said, "Do you do that?" I said, "I've got no way of testing this."
So we're at a Crash event.
Yeah.
Out there in the halls and in the rooms, there are lots of Spectrums and lots of homebrew things, and the Spectrum Next, of course. Do you see anything out there and think, "Oh, I could have a go at that," or "I could make something that would do this"?
I'm really interested in some of the gizmos for, letting games that may not perhaps still be on cassette be played on them, because that's a lot of what we're doing with the development tools. And we, as part of doing the development environment for the Dreamcast, we did the whole GD emulator, which emulates the GD drive in real time, because we didn't want to load the game as fast as possible. We wanted the developer to have the same speed of loading, and we even calculated head sled movement times and focusing times and things to try and get the timings right. So some of that interests me from kind of an intellectual challenge point of view. But I do have a soft spot for the Spectrum, but it occupied just such a brief window of my life, really. And I've still got some of the my first 2 home computers, the Superboard and the Dragon. I've still got those, but everything else we've had since, I'm afraid a lot of it's in the skip.
Oh, skip?
Yeah. We do. It's just we moved on. It's even like all the STs and Amigas we had for doing all of that work. They when we moved on to the next thing, there was just a big clear out, and some of it went to the loft. My wife Mary spends a lot of time eBaying stuff we fish out of the loft, but some of the old merch from shows that sells an awful lot better than some of the games hardware does, actually. But it's amazing what people buy. Yeah. But it is nice to see it not be forgotten. Do I have the same enthusiasm for it as many people out there? I'm gonna have to admit I probably don't. But it's everybody finds their own area to obsess about. My wife says I don't have hobbies, I have a series of unfortunate obsessions. And maybe if I start getting into this Spectrum stuff, my mind would disappear down that rabbit hole for a while, so we'd probably better avoid that one.
So you talked about throwing out the previous generation of hardware. I don't know if you know the name Marty Goldberg or Kurt Vendel. They wrote a book about Atari based on things they dumpster dived for. So they'd literally got permission to go through the skips at Atari, old documentation, notes, design sheets and everything, and they've written books based on it. So I'm guessing you kept no documentation or anything either.
I've kept bits and bats, and I went through a box in the loft and sorted it out. But
we go now. Try that.
Hello? Hello? Do we share for a while?
There you go.
There we go. How's that? For I'm going to take a guess. 22 years, I didn't have the carrier command source code. It was on some floppies that were totally unreadable, and I always said I would like to try and get this data back sometime, and eventually, I think it was when Bohemia were doing the remake, I went, well, now's the time, and it took me 3 months, and I ended up having to use don't know if you know it, a cat weasel card to let you read Amiga discs on a PC. It just reads the raw MFM data off, because they were so damaged, I was having to write Python to parse the MFM disk data and reconstruct what I could, and brute force bad CRCs and things like that, but I got every single bit of source code back. But it's that one nearly hit the dumpster, and I do have a soft spot for that code base.
Right. So, anyone out there in the audience got any questions? Yeah. Let's hear from someone else because we've heard from you a couple of times.
With 3D stuff, going back to the other times, the Starstrike and Tanky or things like that. One of the things that make the 3D is how fast they can run. So, as a programmer, I just try to get an idea of how nerdy you go with the optimization of it.
I knew the Z80 instruction set and all the T-states so well, I could rewrite the inner loop of the polygon filler in my head while lying in the bath with different register allocations and count up the T-states.
Are you doing things like, with having different multiply routines to handle different numbers of bits?
Yes.
So,
and
you're really going there.
and the 8x8 multipliers you use a square table for.
Yeah.
You just have to do a few squares, which is a lookup and some shifts and adds. And you obviously use all the illegal instructions, the halves of the IX and IY registers. And it's even stupid tricks like, if anybody knows the Z80 instruction set, it's a little bit short on 16-bit adds and subtracts.
Yeah.
But it's got a few, well, two more than people know about, because they know about, SBC, HL, DE, BC. You can do SBC, HL, SP. So if while you're in the polygon filler or your line drawer, you put your stack 32 bytes down from the top of memory, you're subtracting -2 from HL, which takes you down a line on the spectrum screen, because we used an offline screen buffer. So yeah, we use the stack pointer as a constant.
Yeah. And still you found someone to marry you.
You're subtracting the stack point from the address register.
Yeah. Yeah, you just moved the stack while you were in that routine. But yeah, we would do anything and everything. Self-modifying code, yes. The 3D objects throughout, even for carrier command, would only ever rotate. The center you rotated with big 16-bit rotates, and then you do 3 points for the points of a cube, and then you just that one gives that one through the middle. You've got 8 points of a cube, and then in a little interpreter you go, well, pick up that point, interpolate with that point. That gets us that point, and all of that is an add and a shift. So you just keep interpolating to generate new points in the object. So you rotated 3 points, but you get every point you want in this 3D object. So you've almost done it without any rotates in a tiny little interpreter that just picks up the command byte and indexes off it into a jump table, and away you go. I think there were about. I think the line drawer split into about 8 different bits. It wasn't just in fact probably 10 for pure horizontals and verticals, and probably some for pure diagonals. They were big pieces of code when you unrolled them. But they were the things that you spent most of your time doing. So, but you figure out a new way of doing it, and you go back and rewrite it completely. So I think we must have rewritten the Starstrike 2 polygon filler 6 or 7 times, and probably another one when I came up with the stack trick.
Anyone else?
I know you said you didn't want to go down the spectrum rabbit hole again.
Yeah.
What's one of your games you'd like to see on the net? If you could choose.
If I could choose, it's difficult. I think Starstrike was a better game, but it wasn't original. And Starstrike 2 was original and was polygons, but I don't know if I'd say it was a better game or not. I don't know. I'd probably go with Starstrike. Yeah. We sold more of those.
Anyone else? Go on. Yeah, go for it.
See, we made Starstrike 1 polygons with sound, Starstrike 2 with shaded polygons with sound. When Dormont came up with Star Wars with no sound, did you think of making Starstrike 3 as a silent movie?
Have you ever been asked that before?
No. I thought it was interesting that the vector graphics guys doing the official remakes a few years after we'd done the inspired by versions, were they as good? There were some things better on them, but we were quite happy to look at them and have a little smile to ourselves, to be honest. But should we have done a Starstrike 3? Probably. Should we have put Starstrike on at least onto the Commodore? Yes, but you make mistakes. You always make mistakes.
Did you find it amusing that they had no sound and you did all that with shaded polygons?
Um,
Polygon sounds, they was too slow.
If our sound had been fantastic, I might have. Let's just say the sound we did on, because you're busy doing 3D all the time, you can't keep breaking off to do something on a speaker. So the sounds we did, we always refer to them as rat farts. And if you're going to be proud that your gamer got some rat farts and somebody else's didn't, there's other things I'd rather be proud of, to be honest.
Yeah.
Did you actually think that you would do Starstrike 3 at some point?
I don't think we ever discussed it. Because
Because the reviews just got better and better, you know. Got a very high rating in Crash for the sequel.
Yeah.
Starstrike 2, and then Character Mark got a really high score as well.
I think we got busy doing other jobs. We got busy doing some things that just brought in money, and then along came, you know, the massive route march that was Carrier Command, which was not only original. It's about the most original thing I have ever personally done. To be honest, it was, I don't know where it came from, and I'm going to have a call out for Andy Onions because while Graham and I were doing all of the 16-bit versions, he did those amazing Spectrum versions pretty much single-handed, and we thought either he would crash and burn or they would be absolute rubbish, but he did a fantastic job on those given what a big game we were giving him to give onto such a small machine. Amazing job he did.
Have you tried to find Andy? Because you said Graham is not in the best of health. Would it be good to get back together?
I probably should try and get in touch with Andy again. Last thing I knew, he was in Switzerland, so he hasn't made it that easy. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Was there a question over there? Someone have a hand up there? Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah.
Next to the wall.
Yeah, I remember playing Starstrike and being absolutely blown away with the missile launch, the voice. It was pretty unheard of back then having voice in the game. So is there a story behind that? Or?
I think the sound sample was done by a lady called Claire at Rainbird, and they sent us on a cassette. And in those days, I got no way of capturing audio, so I actually ended up wire wrapping a 12-bit A to D chip onto a card to stick in an ISO slot on a PC to grab the sound sample. And then, of course, it's the same AY chip in the ST as on the Spectrum. So Jez has just said, oh, I had to do all of this and measure it with this because the resistors are all different and they're different on that, so you have to do different weightings. So we spent ages trying to work out exactly what numbers to do, and then we said, why don't we just assume equal weightings and out come this lovely sound sample. So that AY chip was never designed to do that kind of thing. It was just by driving the 3 channels at the same time and mixing it with the mixer resistors, we got it going. I think the longest job was wire wrapping the card I used to grab the sample. I don't know why we didn't get the sample we used on the ST. I might be mixing that up with some other project where I had to do my own A to D, but yeah, it was early days for that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't share the sample with us, or whether it wasn't right for the job or something. I don't know.
There's another one next door, but one.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what made you decide to use solid shaded polygons for Starstrike 2, because not many people have done that sort of thing. What made you think it was possible to do?
I think the polygons came before the game. I think we
Do the new thing.
we made a huge amount of money from Starstrike because we put the price of the game up. We didn't have a publisher. Between 3 lads in the 20s, we ended up with over 200 grand, and you can imagine that we didn't straight away get straight down to the next game. But we started. Yeah, I don't know where the money went. Don't ask me. I can't remember. But we started playing around. Can we do polygons on this thing? Can we do a polygon filler? And we started playing around and playing around and playing around. And we're like, yes, for very small numbers of polygons we can do. How can we do something based off Starstrike using these smaller number of polygons? I think we actually, if you look at the Starstrike 2 attract mode of those ships coming in and turning and going off, that's all we had for a long time. But, that was our proof of concept. And the proof of concept made it into the final game.
Any other questions? Go on.
So you worked on the Dreamcast with obviously the 3D chip and the Power VR. Do you think if they went with 3DFX, it would have changed their functions in terms of 3D?
I don't know.
Was that one as well?
That as well. Shall I just shout?
Yeah, we'll shout.
I think the machine could have been just as good using a 3DFX chip, but it couldn't have been done in America because Sega of America just didn't have the resources. So at the end of the day, going with the NEC chip was probably the best decision, and was also what led me into the later career with Imagination Technologies, because they provide all of the 3D for in there. But you know, as I say, I backed both horses. I've got development hardware for both in the office, you know, the very early hardware, which is now obviously skipped somewhere. I think that the technologies were kind of roughly equivalent. There were some advantages to the deferred rendering of IMG, but it just needed the massive resources of, you know, NEC and Hitachi and Sega of Japan behind them to put all the chipsets together. There was a lot to that chipset beyond 3D graphics. We designed the processor and the graphics chip alongside each other with everybody in the same room. So some of the weird modes for bus mastering between them were amazing, and the matrix multiplies we got Hitachi to put in the SH4 were amazing. We actually added 20% to the chip die area of the SH4 with instructions we then told Hitachi they couldn't document for the people.
Secret sauce.
Any other questions? We're running low on time. I know Ian's going to sign.
Lots of stuff for you. And we've got another talk starting soon, so go on, we'll have another question.
Something else that fascinates me is games like Just Cause, big open world, you can stand on a map, see fly with even lower detail. Were you doing anything with it, carrying command, or was it just whichever island you were nearest?
Yeah, the islands you weren't close to basically didn't exist. They were just packed away as a bunch of statistics. It's
whichever one you're nearest, that's what the graphics.
you could only have a maximum of 2 islands in existence in the 3D world at once. We made sure of that with the ranges of various things, and would have preferred it to have been 1 island, to be honest. 2 was quite a lot to handle.
And everything else was just blue, I suppose.
Yeah, everything else was good. No, we had dots on it.
Oh, yeah. The difference in, I say, between that, say, tank fuel, in the desert, everything is flat, and again, see everything
Yeah.
flat. Doing adding landscaping, was a hell of a lot of process.
It was. I mean, the first time I worked myself on a game where you had a complex terrain to drive over was Abrams Battle Tank on the Genesis, where I was taking the PC version and trying to get it working on the Genesis, which was a struggle at times from speed and control system. But again, it was a game that it's one of these that almost wrote itself. I worked on that one single-handedly, including doing all of the audio, which was the first time I'd ever really got deeply into audio on the FM synth chip on that thing. But yeah, it was everything else, the flat world. I mean, I remember how hard it was getting those walruses to go up the beach of the island and act like they were slipping around. So I've got a lot of admiration for people who do complex environments, because it is a lot harder work, you're right.
Probably not many people doing walrus physics.
Yeah, we were doing walrus physics, yeah.
So I asked you at the start how you feel about all of this. How do you feel about it now? Has it whetted your appetite to come and talk about things you did 40 years ago?
I don't mind talking about the things, and I'm quite happy to chat to people. Whether it's for me, I don't know. I don't know. I may end up at some Dreamcast retro event. You never know. I think I've probably got a softer spot for that one, because we really did have high hopes for the Dreamcast, and we got a lot right. But I mean, the Spectrum was what started it all. It was the foundations of what became my career, such as it is, and you've got to love it for that. But it's like the foundations of your house. They're very important, but are they your favourite bit, really?
Well, I'm sure even if you never do it again, I'm sure we're all glad you came and did it this time. So please join me in thanking.
And now I think you're going to have to sign lots of posters.